And first agenda item, any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Bond, Hughes and Ripton. We're substituting today is Councillor Franks and Councillor Hobson.
Thank you very much. Second item, the approval of minutes from the previous meeting. Do I have any proposers? Thank you, Councillor Franks. Do I have a seconder at all for the minutes of the previous meeting? Thank you, Councillor G. We'll take a second, having read them. If you observe them as well. Steve, you? Okay, just in case. Thank you. Thank you, and Councillor Flitter for a second. Could I have all those in favour, please?
I shall have to abstain because I wasn't here.
Just to collect any abstentions. Thank you very much. And I take it no against? No. Excellent. Thank you. Third item, there's no public participation, just to confirm. No. Thank you. And...
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't here.
Thank you, Chair.
Duly seconded, Chair.
Duly seconded. I'll second it.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Any members' interests? No, thank you. There were no questions put forward. I think so. On to our first item of business, the external audit progress report.
Thank you, Chair. A relatively brief update report from me this evening. Summarises the progress we made and the final conclusions on the 22-23 audit, casting your minds back to the earlier part of the year. We completed and signed that off in April with an unqualified audit opinion. That's the right one, that's the good one that you want. And a value for money commentary which was unchanged from the draft that you saw in February. In the 23-24 audit progress, we've completed our audit planning, and item 7, which we'll come to, is the output from that. We've yet to receive the draft accounts, but we're not planning to start our audit work until October, so timings work fine in terms of aiming to complete that work before the end of the calendar year. So progress is as we were expecting at the moment. And we've also summarised the position on the national consultations which happened back in the spring from DLUC, as was called back in the spring, and the National Audit Office. So we've summarised those, noting that there isn't any published outcome to those yet, and that is still expected imminently, and when that's received we'll update Karen and report back to you at a subsequent meeting. The one bit that I think will impact on you from those consultations is the proposal from the National Audit Office that auditors report annually on the progress with their work, and that is done by the end of November, incorporating the value for money commentary on the year that preceded that. So in practical terms, that would mean me bringing a report to either your October or your early December meeting, summarising the work on our value for money work for 23-24. So that is our priority right now, to complete that so that we're in a position to do that reporting. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the floor? Or anything to add, Karen, from yourself on that audit? Thank you, Karen.
I will just ask, Chair, on the completion of the audit, is it usual that we have to wait for certificates of validation? And you know, what's you have said that there's no expected work to be taken after that, but what's the time frame?
really good couple of questions. Is it usual? It has been over the past 2 or 3 years. It's a procedural matter whereby I can't officially close the audit and issue the certificate until the National Audit Office tell me that they definitely don't need me to do any more work on the council's whole of government accounts submission, which Karen made, I don't know how many months or years ago. There is no likelihood that they do ask me to do any work, but until they formally say, I don't need you to do any work, Alistair, I can't issue that certificate, because as soon as I issue that certificate, I then don't have any powers to do any work on that year. So that's why it's happened. It's predominantly caused by the delays to the whole of government accounts reporting, which in and of itself is linked to the delays on so many councils' audits elsewhere in the country. Likely timescale, I really could not guess. I would hope that it's within the next few months, but I'm not a gambling man, and I would be gambling if I gave you any confident guess of when that might happen. As soon as it does happen, I'll be issuing the certificate immediately, and I'll be notifying Karen. That is something that needs publishing on the council's website, so you will know as soon as it happens.
Thank you, Alistair. Any other questions from the floor on the audit? Any proposals if we have no further questions? Councillor G.
Could I just ask a question? You know this continued delay on auditing that's come back from the government, because that seems to have been going on quite a long time, because I was on a previous council at Amber Valley, and I think that was going on for about the last 4 years. Well, I think it was Mazars were on that. Is that likely to have any impact on this council at all?
It has no direct impact on Derbyshire Dales, because we have completed the 22-23 audit, which is the last one that we could have completed. In the future, it's not impossible that it could have an impact, but very unlikely, because we have no backlog here, we have no delay. There is a potential, and it is a small potential, that there's an indirect impact, depending on what arrangements are put in place to catch up those backlogs, that resourcing wise that could have an impact potentially on any council. I don't expect that to be the case. I'm not planning for that to be the case, as I'll cover on the next item in terms of the 23-24 audit. I'm not expecting that to be the case. I'm expecting that we will be able to progress and complete in a good time frame.
Thank you. So we're expecting the future reports to come through in a timely manner then?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff. Thank you. Any further questions from the floor? Do I have anyone to propose? Thank you, Councillor Flitter. Do I have a seconder at all? Thank you, Councillor Butt. And could I put it to the vote? Everyone for then, please? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. On to item number 7, which, as you alluded to, is your second item, Alistair. Thank you very much. I shall leave it to your good self.
Okay, thank you. So item 7 is our audit plan for the audit year 23-24 for the financial year that ended end of March 2024. There are very few changes from the prior year. We are looking at a fairly consistent year in terms of risks, audit approach, methodology, etc. I'll touch on a few things briefly for members, but happy to take any questions on the plan and the risks that are in there. One new thing to touch on is my previous audit manager, John Presley, has now had started his very well-earned retirement. So we have a new audit manager who's started with the council and has hit the ground very, very running. If that's the right phrase, Ellie West. So Ellie will be along to future meetings to present reports either with me or deputising for me. In terms of the risks, there are no new risks that we are expecting to focus on in our audit work. The risks that we've highlighted are either those that are mandated and required by auditing standards, or they are those areas that are the large figures in the council's accounts that are subject to what auditors would call estimation uncertainty, i.e. there's a greater chance that the value might be wrong for things that are estimated than known. So those areas around the valuation of the land and buildings and the valuation of the pensions are things that we will focus on again this year. In terms of the value for money work, linking on from what I've just said on the previous item, we've completed our planning work for the VFM work. We haven't identified any risks for that work. We still need to go through and complete that work to form a view on the council's arrangements, and we will be completing that as soon as we can, as I say, so we can report back to either the next or the next but one meeting of this committee. The audit fees you will see in section 6 of the report, the audit fees are higher than the previous year. I need to highlight to you the audit fees are set by the appointing body, public sector audit appointments, and is not something that I or Forvis Mazars have any input to or sway on. PSAA carried out a very thorough consultation process last autumn on the audit fees for this new contract that they have let for audits. And the increase in fees is effectively a rebalancing from the position that had been seen over the past 5 to 10 years, where audit fees had reduced significantly, while at the same time council's accounts became more complex and auditing standards placed more onerous requirements on auditors. So you had a very imbalanced position over the past few years, which is why you have seen such a significant increase in your audit fees. The final thing on fees I do need to say, and I would say this, wouldn't I, but it is true, they are not our audit fees. We do not receive those. We collect those on behalf of PSAA and pass those to PSAA, and as your auditor we have a contract with PSAA which pays us a different amount of money, which I'm not at liberty from PSAA to disclose any of that, but that is the fees position. Final thing I wanted to say was just in section 7 that I confirmed that I and our audit team are all independent of the council, which is a very important aspect to highlight to you, that there are no conflicts or independence issues with me or my team.
Thank you very much. Councillor Flitter, I can see you burning on this one.
Yeah, thank you for Alistair for explaining the costs, because that was certainly an issue. I think somebody reading this report for the first time certainly wouldn't understand, especially as in the previous papers you've said that there were no changes to the approach in your audit, and yet we find £64,000 turned into £120,000 for the costs of doing the audit. So I was reminded that we were aware of this in the autumn, and we did make some budgetary conditions for that and expectations, but it's hard to justify to the local public that suddenly we're having to pay double, and I take the word you used, rebalancing. I mean, let's not tell members of the NHS that, you know, over what they could have got over the last 10 years. That, to me, is is not really thoughtful. I understand it, but it's one side of society that's actually getting some recompense. That's a personal view. But the other thing I just wanted to bring up was that on page 57, I think that has to be reworded, because I know this is a plan for this year and these are dangers at the bottom of 57, but you do put on the title significant difficulties encountered during the course of the audit, which again makes the members of the public feel that our officers and our staff haven't been producing the right goods for you to do your audit. And I think something needs to be altered in there so that that is a true reflection of what may be or are the dangers rather than that has happened.
Thank you for those comments. I personally believe that that section and that paragraph does make it clear that we will highlight to you if these things do happen, and we don't say that they have happened. This is, as you say, is a plan that we are required to report to you certain things by auditing standards, and that is one of those elements that we're required to report to you. If we do encounter significant difficulties, you as the body that's charged with governance for the financial statements will want to know that there have been difficulties. So I'm quite happy to make that clear. Happy for the minutes to make that clear that we have not encountered significant difficulties. But I think the wording of the report is quite clear that we will highlight to you on a timely basis should we encounter any of those difficulties, and we are not saying that we have or expect to, for that matter, based on past history.
Thanks, Chair, but I just want to follow up and make that it doesn't say we will. It just says significant difficulties encountered, and that one word in itself doesn't read right in that sentence. So I would like this noted that none of our officers.
No, thank you, Councillor. I think it's noted. I'll note that in the minutes then. Were there any further questions on this? Councillor Buttle.
I'm wondering about your methodology. Like, you come in and you look at the big ticket items, and my gran used to tell me that if I looked after the pennies, the pounds would look after themselves. So why don't you sample in and sort of drill down into a particular random section?
It's a really good question, and we do is the answer to the question. The plan that you've got in front of you highlights those things that are of significant risk to us. So they're the major things to highlight to you that we will focus on. That doesn't mean that we only audit those items. We audit all items within the accounts, and there are two specific elements that I would highlight to you on that point, specifically about drilling down into smaller items. While it is true that we focus on material matters, materiality is something that we've explained and highlighted for you in the report. So we do focus on material matters, but not exclusively. So there's a requirement for us to have some unpredictability in our testing every year, so that we don't just test the same items every year and never look at certain items. So I plan the audit to specifically focus in on areas that we haven't previously audited, precisely those things that may be misstated, but maybe things that auditors have never looked at in the past. So we have to do that every year. And our overarching approach to sampling and sample testing is, to use an audity phrase, haphazard. And what that means is that when we're sample testing transactions and balances, every item in that population has an equal chance of being selected. So we don't just test the big items and ignore the little ones. Everything's got a chance of being tested. Does that help?
It does definitely help. Would you be looking at 1 in 100 items or 1 in 1,000?
It would completely depend on the balance that we're testing, the element of risk that we've got to that, and the amount of assurance that we need to test. So for some items, we will be testing a lot more than 1 in 100. For some items, we will be testing a lot less than 1 in 1,000, depending on the balance and the item that we're testing.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's very thorough. Any other? Councillor G.
Yeah, it's because I'm actually new to this committee, and I'm also it's just had my first year on this council, and I'm quite happy that this meeting seems quite relaxed and there isn't too much sweating despite the weather. So it feels good, you know, there's no talk of in-year deficit and stuff like that, but I just want to reiterate that this council needs to be careful with things that, you know, things like the waste contract and the leisure centres that could cause a problem in the future. So it's important that everybody on this council takes that on board, that we're happy now, but things can change quite quickly. So obviously this is really helpful to have this type of committee and people gather understanding about it, because I've seen situations in the past where really it's difficult to resolve those issues and almost they get swept under the carpet. But the major big issues for this council, that's where I see the financial problems could come in the future.
Thank you, Councillor G. You've moved to say, and you're not wrong there. And I think processes like the audit assure that we're doing the right things, we're taking the right steps, or if not, we're putting the right processes in place to correct those steps.
Yeah, I don't know if you wanted me to come back on any of that, Joe. What I would say is that the points that have just been made in those comments very much link in with our value for money arrangements work and the work that we do to satisfy ourselves that the council has proper arrangements in place to deliver financial sustainability as one of the key criteria to our value for money work. So that is a core plank of the work that we do on understanding and being satisfied on the council's arrangements, albeit that it is focused on the arrangements rather than the actual achievement of financial sustainability. But it is within our audit scope. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any further questions from the floor at all? I just had a quick one actually myself, and that was, you mentioned there was the upping of the complexity levels that had required you to up your fees. Is there a complexity matrix that's applied to each council as to the complexity, because obviously we're all slightly different in how we do, to measure us, as it were?
If there is, that's something that I'd have to ask you to address to PSAA as the fee setter, and because I don't have access to that. I suspect there is, because larger, more complex councils have much higher fees, and relatively speaking, smaller, less complex organisations have lower. I've never seen it. I wouldn't be party to it. So if there is, it's something that PSAA would be able to help you with.
Thank you very much. Do I have any proposals for that? Councillor? And do I have a seconder? And Councillor Shelley? And can I have everyone for? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alistair. Thank you. And on to the next item, the annual governance statement. Karen, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the annual governance statement is required under the Accounts and Audit Regulations. Once approved by members here, it will be incorporated into the draft statement of accounts and published on the Council's website for inspection. What the annual governance statement does is it compares the governance arrangements that were in place in 23-24 against the Council's approved Code of Corporate Governance. So that code has 7 principles, which are essentially the know-them principles of public life. And what this statement does is it tests our arrangement against those principles. So if you look at pages 85 to 103 of the agenda, you can see the evidence that I've tried to gather in compiling the statement against each of those principles. And there are some items of evidence that fall into more than one principle. So except in some cases there's a bit of overlap. But the column on the right, I've used that to try to highlight areas of particular strengths with a tick, or areas of weakness with a yellow warning sign. And some of those areas of weakness have been picked up in the action plan. So page 112 and 113 shows the progress against the actions that were identified as significant areas of weakness in last year's annual governance statement, and some of those haven't been fully completed, and so they've been rolled into the 23-24 action plan, which is shown on pages 113 and 114 of the agenda. So the report's identified 5 areas of significant weakness that need to be addressed. 2 of those areas, data protection and procurement, are identified in the internal audit report, which is later on the agenda. So members might want to ask particular questions about those as part of that report. The other 3 items are all to be dealt with. The other 3 items are financial planning, which you'll all know financial sustainability is a high risk area. There's action where we need to strengthen financial regulations in terms of grant processes. And the final area, which eludes me, is about the investigation of a complaint against the council. So that complaint was reported to this committee in February, but not all the actions have been implemented yet. The action plan items shown on page 116 of the agenda, they're all due to be implemented within the next 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Karen. Any questions? I've got one, but people on the floor. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Alistair. It's obviously, it's where councillors reading through it, it's a bit alarming when you see those yellow triangles. So thank you for that explanation, Karen. But is there anything that you see as a sort of like a common denominator with the council that we need to be looking at across all the various ones? Or is that?
I'm not sure there's a common denominator other than some of the issues, as I've said, came forward from last year's action plan, and I think some of that just relates to the capacity that officers have had to address some of these things. We've recently stepped up that. You'll hear that arrangements are in place to have a data protection consultant that's coming to help manage that now. So that was something that was planned 12 months ago, but has only recently been able to be put into place. I think that's possibly the common denominator, just capacity of officers to deal with some of these things.
So is that something that the council will address if it's able, if capacity is looking like it's an issue every year and getting behind, which is going to put stress on the people that are doing the job anyway, isn't it?
There's reports coming to council next week, 2 reports, one about interim arrangements and one about permanent staffing requirements.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson. Any further questions from the floor? Councillor Flint?
Not a question, but I'll just say that I did make comments about overlap on this report, but sometimes it's necessary, and I just want to thank Karen for the expertise, the professionalism of which the report was presented.
Thank you, Councillor Fitter. I agree. I think it's an excellent report. Thank you. One item for me that I did discuss was obviously the investigation against the complaint. What have we got a timeline for that LGA peer review? It says 25-26, but just to have a little clarity on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. There'll be an update on that work come to the next meeting of GNR. I think there's been some exploratory conversations with the Local Government Association as part of the next corporate peer challenge, which all councils must now have as part of best value guidance, which was issued by the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government a few months ago. So that will be coming up. I think there's a general suggestion to have a corporate peer challenge within Q1 of the next financial year. So we'll be bringing that to members to discuss, as well as an update against the action plan.
Thank you. We'll look forward to that. Any further questions for anyone? Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Buttle.
Alan, this LGA challenge, will we be able to ask them to I think I have, I'm just pointing in the wrong direction. This LGA challenge, will we be able to ask them to theme it to cover these issues that have been raised through the complaint?
Yes, there is an opportunity in which to point the LGA and the peer review team, which will be a blend of officers from different councils and also member peers, in which to sort of request that they look at specific areas. That could be governance, that could be finance, could be place leadership, a range of different functions of the council. But it's a collaborative approach. It isn't a one-size-fits-all type approach. So there will be a lot of dialogue that will go on between the LGA team and the council to make sure that the scope of the corporate peer challenge is the right one.
Thank you very much. Any further questions for anyone? Do I have proposers at all? Thank you, Councillor Shelley. Do I have a seconder at all? Thank Councillor Bates. Go on. Thank you, Councillor Bates. Right, could I have everyone vote for, please? That's unanimous, just to confirm. Thank you very much. Thank you. And on to agenda item number 9, the productivity plan. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. And just to introduce my colleague Glenn Burton to members this evening. Glenn is our Digital Transformation Project Manager, and I'll bring in Glenn shortly just to support members to go through the report that is in front of them this evening. A few months ago now, we were asked by government in which to develop and submit a productivity plan. We have done that, and that is part of the agenda pack today. We were given a fairly broad brief in which to guide the content of that plan, which I believe that we have met. Our draft plan talks about some of the successes that this council has had already. With respect to making savings and being productive in itself, pulling out some of the areas in the report, such as the development of our CRM system, and we also did 10 years ago a whole-scale review of our shared services, corporate services function, in which we created the business support unit, of which Caroline Leatherday is the manager of, which today has saved this council around £500,000 already. So we think we're in a really good position in which to move our productivity forward, and the report outlines some of those areas where we could go further. And at this point, Chair, I'd like to hand over to Glenn to share his work with members.
Thank you. Glenn.
Thank you, Chair. I think Helen set the tone quite well. There, obviously, this was a piece of work that came in, was alluded to in January, I believe it was, and then sort of finalised in April. And obviously, since then, work's been ongoing with CLT and members around the council to pull together the requirements. It was quite a short deadline to work to and a relatively loose brief, as mentioned. So where possible, we've obviously tried to collaborate and compare and contrast with other councils, but many not having had time to get them published out either. So it really built on themes that we'd already pulled together through work that had obviously been done previously, which was very much asked for, leading into work that we'd already got on the agenda and either progressing in terms of productivity gains or had plans to look at in the future as well. Obviously, the initiatives that we plan for going forward, some of those will be potentially costed ones, but we'll come up with business cases at the time and need to be reviewed. Some of them are more aspirational in terms of things like use of AI, in terms of how we might be able to integrate AI into future work, and will obviously be somewhat dependent on developments within the industry as well.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the floor? Well, I was going to ask them. Obviously, I did questions before. Is with the KPIs on this, I think just reflect back to us how those are going to be measured, because obviously any productivity we need to show that. How are we going to show it, please?
Yes, certainly. So we haven't explicitly broken down the KPIs because a number of them will be dependent on the actual actions that get taken forwards. However, there are particular initiatives within the productivity plan which are around developing and increasing our capacity around KPIs generally and performance management. That work's undergoing at the moment, and we're bringing out a draft of new dashboards and ways of collecting data to help with that. But there is a much bigger question around KPIs going forwards in terms of whether we currently measure the right ones and what we will need for particular initiatives going forwards. There's other elements within the productivity plan around service reviews, baseline assessments, and they're built solely all on data. So they produce a suite of data outputs that obviously inform where we are currently, where we need to go, and then can measure back on. So whether we did with around lean service reviews, for example, earlier on in the CRM project phase, produced a suite of data for each different process that we went through and showed the measurable benefits from the initial position, the current state, through to the future state that we could obviously transfer into real life and see those benefits for.
Okay, well, excellent, thank you. It would be good to see that data maybe at some point in the future when that comes through. I suppose, any further questions? Sorry, Councillor Bottle.
Yes, thanks, Glenn. I think we share our IT services with North East Derbyshire and somebody else. Have you worked together with them on this, or is this your own work? Do we have a commonality of purpose?
This is our own work for the most part, as alluded to in the report around this. The barriers section is a collaborative enterprise. But the actual initiatives throughout the rest of it is predominantly our own. We don't procure the service for transformation from the joint ICT partnership, but obviously there is overlap, and it's fair to say that wherever possible we do try to align our initiatives and always looking to take them further. But at the moment this piece of work is our own, though it has been shared within the region more generally, so that obviously people are looking on the same page.
Thanks.
No, be bold, Glenn, be bold. The other thing that I did have on this one was around the, what was it now? It was, apologies, bear with me, just coming back to me. No, it's gone. I'll come back to me in a minute. Apologies. Is there any other questions from the floor? Sorry, I did have one. No?
Another question, I was just going to comment.
Go on.
Okay. Well, we have had discussions on this report and where it would go, who would be looking at it, what it would be used for. And now we've that was an indication from the last government. The present government has changed, and noting that they will work with local authorities more closely. I see this as a document that may be picked up within the realms of central government and look towards fair funding for councils, because they can see what we're doing, and I think it will enable them to see what we actually do as a local authority. And I say that because at the East Midlands Council last week we were talking about transportation in the East Midlands, and we're rock bottom on both counts the bottom of the funding league, and we're pressing hard on that. But I don't really think that, certainly the last government didn't realise what actually we do in the council and how we try to progress. This is another document that may aim to fill those gaps. So I'm willing to move the officer recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fletcher. I have just remembered my question, and that was really around actually if this was a quite a woolly remit given to yourselves. It was how do we turn that productivity report into something obviously conscious in future years' funding. We've got all that challenge around that cost to actually, use that work for that and not just have it as a standalone piece of work.
I think that's a fair question. Obviously, it's ultimately going to be down to the papers that we bring forward around this work, I think, and support from the members to obviously progress that. Obviously, some of the initiatives outlined in here could potentially be quite resource and potentially even cost intensive. Obviously, they may not ultimately go forward if they're cost prohibitive, but I think it's bearing that sense of productivity in mind and the benefits that we could get when we bring further papers forward in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. Sorry, Councillor Flitter, and just to reiterate there, were you forwarding the motion there? Oh, he's moved it, thank you. Do I have a seconder at all, please? Councillor Bishop. Could I have everyone who voted for, please? Is that unanimous? Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
That will be submitted tomorrow, because tomorrow is the deadline.
And that will be submitted tomorrow as the deadline for that particular report was tomorrow. Thank you. So just to go to item 10, Risk Management Annual Report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the Council has a risk management policy and strategy that was approved by this committee last September. And as part of that strategy, this annual report is required to be presented to the committee. So the strategy itself sets out how the Council identifies, understands and manages its risks. In practical terms, this is done by managers, it's done by the Risk Continuity Group, and it's also done by the corporate leadership team and particularly the Statutory Officers Group. In addition to that, risks are assessed as part of every report that comes before a committee or council. There are strategies and there's a strategic and an operational risk register. Each directorate has its own operational risk register, and the Risk Continuity Group monitors the strategic risk register quarterly. The operational risk registers are intended to be sort of living documents and updated regularly. As you can see from Appendix 1, risk management training is being developed, and we'll be rolling that out in the autumn to ensure that all managers and members have a sound understanding of risk management and what's expected of them. Chart 1 in the report is a bar chart that shows the 14 risks currently on the risk register. It shows the current score given by the Risk Continuity Group and the target score. Appendix 2 shows the mitigating actions that are required in able to reduce the risk scores down to the target score. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any questions from the floor? I think I carried one, and that was really around the health and safety, and that was to include CDM, construction design management impact. That's something that we've seen from Grenfell and issues like that, where I know we've picked up on RAC and obviously asbestos, but also if there's any issues, say if the building fell down, the liability of that and our design of that and our management of building that would fall to us, basically, and just to understand that. Thanks. And that's monitored through the Health and Safety Executive as part of any project that's done. So, for instance, in Ashbourne Reborn, for instance, that should be managed by it's cliented out to the construction company, but ultimately we're the client at the end of that strain, and we need to have put the right requirements in the first place to make sure that meets standards. Any other exciting questions? Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, do I have a proposer at all? Thank you, Councillor Hobson. Any seconders? Thank you, Councillor Fredericks. I can have a vote then, please. Everyone for, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you. On to item 11, Communications, Marketing and Strategy Annual Report. Jim, if I could leave it to your capable hands.
The Communications and Marketing Strategy is an annual report to this meeting. It's a bit late this year for reasons I'll get on to. While the actual strategy, which we first adopted 10 years ago, doesn't change very much, apart from almost inevitably some new social media channels we've added next door this year, the associated action plan is dynamic. So you'll see that I'm asking you this evening to note the current strategy and to approve the proposed action plan for 2024-25. So before I get on to the new plan, I hope you'll allow me just to pick out a couple of highlights from last year's action plan. And you'll see at 2.1 that the main action for the year was to lead partners in the communication progress of the £15 million Ashbourne Reborn programme, which is really crucial. We achieved this by creating social media channels, an e-newsletter, I hope you've seen some of these, a bespoke web area and a partnership communications group. Crucially, we've also appointed for the duration of the programme a communications officer, Anna Paxton, with direct responsibility for Ashbourne Reborn Comms. She's employed by the District Council, but she's really moving this project forward from a comms point of view, and she's actually doing a fantastic job. Another big action in the past year was a project to improve and make more accessible the District Council's website. We've halved the number of pages and improved navigation, and my thanks go to my colleague Cora Marchant for leading this successful project alongside our own ICT web development team. So we've done it on the cheap, but it's actually very effective. Moving on to this year's proposed action plan, the big item you'll see is at 3.1, and that's generating additional revenue from asset generation by partnering with a well-established media company. And it's a reason why this report's a little late, because we've been negotiating the contract over the past few months. Thanks to our procurement officer, that's Sherry Russell, we're now ready to sign contracts with a company that already has relationships with several other small councils, but also some of the largest counties, so they're really well established. I want to stress that while asset generation isn't new to us, we can and must do it better. Currently, selling advertising and sponsorship is a very small part of some colleagues' general responsibilities, including mine, actually. So the company we propose to partner with in a 5-year contract, there's a 3-year break clause, specialises not only in traditional advertising and sponsorship, but also in gadgets, which you may have seen, such as display boards, digital display boards in car parks, etc., etc. As these locations are within our own ownership, we retain absolute control over those decisions, which is really crucial when it comes to managing any local sensitivities. Once the contract, which has a 60-40 revenue share in our favour, is signed, the company will carry out site assessments. So those car parks, other areas that we own where we can sort of really get sponsorship income in, thinking about parks as well in a very sensitive sort of way. And that gives us a better idea of potential revenue. So I can't really talk about revenue at this stage. All I can guarantee is it's going to be substantially more than we get at the moment. So I hope that members will agree that this is a proposal where the benefits far outweigh any perceived negatives. Just moving on to 3.2, you'll see that we're aiming to complete our large park signage project. Those of you who've been here in previous administrations know that we've put large signs, park signs into Ashbourne, Bakewell, and also, where's the other place? Matlock. Yeah, that's the one. And now we're looking to extend that into Matlock Bath, into the Lovers Walks and Derwent Gardens. These, I'm happy to say, are funded from former sponsorship income from signage projects that we've done in the past, so it won't cost the taxpayers any money at all. And in addition to providing improved information about the parks, including their history, the signs feature a PSBO on a separate panel. This means that we've got the flexibility to move those PSBOs if we need to, if you'd make different decisions about PSBOs in the future. Happy to say that Councillor Whitehead, who's a member in that area, is happy with the signs, as are Matlock Bath Parish Council, so that's all good news. Other actions proposed for 24-25 are in the main continuations of previous actions, including the Ashbourne Reborn programme, where we anticipate, of course, communication will be more important than ever as the groundwork starts to happen in the coming year and beyond. I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the floor? Councillor Buffle.
Thanks, Jim. If we end up with a nice big bright shiny sign that's telling us all sorts of useful stuff, will it need planning permission, and will there be control on the level of light that it may be casting over neighbouring properties?
Yes, it will require planning permission, and actually planning is that they've laid out a strategy of the approach, and that's one of the first things they'll be doing probably within 4 weeks. The very first thing will of course be to visit the sites and draw up plans for them, but yeah, planning permission will happen hopefully within 4 weeks.
So there will be some consultation with the people that are directly affected?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor G.
Yeah, with regard to planning permission, how have you been getting on with Peak National Park Planning Authority?
Okay. Yeah, we put signs in Bakewell Park quite recently, and the Peak Park were happy with them. So yeah.
Well, that's really good to hear. So I've never heard that before from anybody.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the floor? No, thank you. Thank you, Jim. Any proposed? Just to check. So are we approving the action plan? Just to propose to move forward with this new agreement that we're going to be striking with this other company.
That's one of the actions. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the key action.
Sorry, I just wanted to play it back to people. Thank you,
Yeah.
cheers, Jim. Thank you, everyone. Councillor Hobson.
Chair, I'm happy to move it. I'd like to thank Jim for all the excellent work, all the newsletters that come out. I try to encourage people to sign up to information from Derbyshire District Council. Particularly, I know we're going back a bit now, but over Storm Babette, the comms team, it was so useful and so appreciated in our local communities. So thank you to all involved.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson. I think everyone echoes that. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have a seconder at all after Councillor Hobson? Thanks, Councillor Bates. Can I have everyone voting for, please? Just to confirm, is that unanimous? Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. Can I go on to the work programme for the year ahead, which is actually, that's going to be one for us, basically, to have a conversation around for training and getting more from the GNR, because for me, watching it over the past year, lots of reports have come here, but we've not had much stuff come back from the members. So I'd like to see reports coming back this coming year. I know some members are looking at doing something around the Nolan principles, but I also know others are looking at paternity and maybe how we can help other councils with doing that. So, but this is really, what do you guys want from this? Because we set the framework for the council and how it's governed. So do we want more training to understand the financial reports? Because they can be a little bit dry, and it might not be that people understand. So if you need that additional support, there is financial funding available, I believe, for some training if people want to go down that particular path. And again, as Councillor G noted, if he was new to this particular group, then obviously any support that you'd require for that as well. Is there any thoughts from the floor at all on that? Councillor G.
Yeah, I have been on governance and audit at Amber Valley, and we did have some treasury management training there, which I think was sort of partly provided by government, was it? And I thought that was really, really useful, just for the wider, to help all members.
Yeah, thank you. And we're taking this down, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring this back at the next session, see what we can make available, and then people can then uptake from there. So this is a bit of an ongoing, continual progressive development for all of us, if that makes sense. Yeah? Councillor Buckle.
I'd like to know what the options are, because it's such a huge subject, and you could probably spend 4 months learning about some tiny little bit of it. So I think I'm mainly interested in overviews, but I quite like a bit of understanding about detail as well. So we're talking about, Councillor G talks about treasury management. I could do with all sorts of bits and bobs on this. It would be really helpful to me. So yeah, I'd like us to come back with a good list.
So a range, basically.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah. No, thank you. Any other thoughts from people? What they'd like to see? No, well. Yeah, we'll keep it as a standing item, please, if we could, just to update the actions for everyone, and just to see. And as we do it, I think it's going to be one of the things. I think a little bit like Councillor Councillor Buttle says that as people do things, other things will open to them. And if there are things that you see on the reports that you want to dig deeper into or to dive deeper into, then say, come along, bring things and stuff. So, because as I say, conscious is very officer-led at the moment, this particular group. Councillor G.
On that same issue, because one of the things that I remember from the Treasury Management training was that there was a lot of emphasis on explaining what you couldn't do as a council with your resources, but there wasn't much on what you could actually do. So it was almost like trying to put you off things, because they've had a lot of bad experiences in the past with other councils that have done all these fancy projects with property and such like, but not really a lot of help on really what we are able to achieve, even if it's smaller things. And some people get frightened off, you know, when you get a council come in and you've got people who are really not in depth, like it's been suggested here. You know, we've got a lot of responsibility, haven't we, to this council. So, but also we want to try and make sure it thrives in the future. So there must be something help we could get to what can be done.
No, agreed. And this really touches on your first point about, okay, we're doing great now at the moment financially, but what are we looking like in the future, and help, and us being part of helping guide that to be an assured space. I think that's what I see it for anyway.
Could I just add, some time ago I was on the SIPFA site online, because I have a life, and one of the things I saw was talking about unleashing the power of audit. Yeah, like, I'd like to know what that is.
As I think Alistair will offer an answer for that one for you. And there is a lot of power to it as well, because he assures what we do. So.
No, I will input to that. I mean, not maybe to unleashing the power of audit, which is a heck of a strap line. Not sure I could possibly live up to that. But if members did feel they needed some training or insight into the role of external audit or internal audit and the relationship between the two and the difference between the two, I'm more than happy to input to that, Chair, if that's what members would
Thank
like.
You,
might be the driest session you have, might be even drier than Treasury Management, but I'll do my best to liven it up.
Not a problem. Councillor Plitter.
Yeah, I mean, just to assure Councillor G that I've been talking about an audit committee here. I've been talking about how we can get involved, how we can help our staff to progress, and get some learning at the same time. I think whatever we do in training or discussing at council has to be relevant. It has to take into account how it affects the operation of this council. And we need to understand most of all the financial and legal implications of what we do. And if we take that on board, I'm sure we'll come up with a programme that will be of help to us all.
Thank you, Councillor Plitter. Well said. If there's not anyone else, then I'll move on to the next item, because as I say, we'll keep this a regular item to update people. Thank you. Item 13, the internal audit report, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our annual report. It summarises the work that we undertook in 2023-24, but it also provides my opinion on the Council's arrangements for governance, risk management and control. So the content of the report is actually reflects what's required by the public sector internal audit standards. So this year we have completed 82% of the internal audit plan, which is sufficient for me to be able to provide an audit opinion. And if you remember back to last year, we're actually in a much better place, because last year we were struggling for an audit team, and this year the reason we haven't achieved 100% of the plan is because we did only get a full audit team from July, so they've actually done really, really well to do as much as they have. So you can see that we've issued 18 reports during the year, and 89% of those reports fell into the substantial and reasonable assurance category, which are very much positive conclusions, and we just had 2 that were a limited conclusion. So all of these reports have been reported to the committee during the year, If you look at Appendix 1, that shows you all 18 reports that were issued with the assurance opinion and together with the opinion of when it was audited last time. I'm always pleased to say that we haven't identified any fraud, you'll be relieved to know. The report also looks at our key performance indicators. So as I say, although we didn't hit the 90% target completion for the audit plan, the two auditors have done a substantial amount of work and done really well to achieve the 82%. And customer satisfaction surveys are really, really high, which shows they're also doing a good job and working well with other officers. So paragraph 4.3, that provides the overall conclusion on the adequacy of the Council's governance, risk and control arrangements. So I am pleased to report that I can provide reasonable assurance, which is a good conclusion. The internal control issues arising from audits in the year have been considered by the Director of Resources 151 officer when she's preparing the annual governance statement. And Karen has just presented the annual governance statement, and you can see that the two limited reports have been reflected in the annual governance statement, and those are in relation to procurement and data protection. Appendix 2 of the annual report provides a full comparison of planned work against completed work, so that the audits that we haven't completed have been carried forward to the 24-25 audit plan. Appendix 3, that details our quality and assurance improvement programme, and this area covered in this document helps to ensure we're meeting the public sector audit standards and also code of ethics. It also includes an improvement plan for 24-25. Our bodies are very keen that we show that we are looking to improve. A lot of that centres around there are some global audit standards produced in January 24, so I'm currently doing a gap analysis to see what we need to do to make sure we comply with those. And CITFA are also going to be publishing something in the autumn to say which bits of those are not applicable to the public sector and sort of how they apply to the public sector. So paragraph 9.1 and 9.2, as our external audit colleague said, it's very important to confirm our independence, and we don't feel that that's been compromised this year. I do have a direct reporting line to the 151 officer, chief exec if I needed it, and also obviously I come to this committee regularly, so I could raise any concerns if I felt I needed to. So the recommendation is the 23-24 internal audit annual report and overall assurance opinion is accepted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jenny, and can I thank you for all your hard work in bringing it up, because as you say, I remember last year when this came and we couldn't actually have a position on it. So well done. Thank you for getting us there. Any questions from the floor? I think the only one I had was my one on health and safety. That was deferred from this year. I notice the illuminations and parks, but obviously health and safety, just to understand how we're going to rein that one back in the coming year, that's all. Thank you.
Yes, so we have got it in the 24-25 plan with some staffing structure changes. It was a bit in flux about health and safety. It's obviously still being managed, but the arrangements were changing, so we thought it worth deferring the audit until the new arrangements are in place and we could have a look at those and assess those.
Thank you, Jenny. Any questions from the floor? Councillor Flitter. See if you've not got a question. Sorry, you're going to propose. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that this is a very good report, and I've always complimented our financial staff at this council for the work that they do, and they keep us on the straight and narrow. And I think this report on 4.1 recognises that although we had difficulties in staffing at that particular time, we didn't have a full complement of staff, we still got this work done, and that's a credit to the team. And, you know, 4.4, you know, that talks about assurance can never be absolute, and that's right, there are always risks. And I think what this does, and I'm quite reassured, because I did have questions on 5.2, but I'm sure that, and the department has put things in place so that we can rectify the shortcomings of those two items and we can move forward. And I think things are in place to be able to do that, and that's only to the credit of the staff that we've got. So thank you very much, and I'm willing to move it, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hobson.
I'll reiterate what Councillor Fitz has said. Thank you to everybody for all the hard work. It's reassuring for us as councillors to know the processes that are in place. So thank you very much. Happy to second it.
Thank you very much. And I'll put that to the vote then, please. Everyone for? Unanimous? Yeah, thank you very much. On to the final item, agenda item 14. But just to everyone to be aware, for the exclusion of public and press, at this point the committee consider excluding public and press from the meeting in order to consider the exempt information contained within item 14 in appendices 2 and 5. So if we do touch on any of the subject matter, we will have to come offline, if that's okay. Thank you very much, everyone, just to be aware. Jenny.
Thank you, Chair.